For discussion if something comes up, or I'll keep going and leave it to the end. It's pretty much up to you, so we'll see how it goes. The area of research that I inhabit basically sits between two visions of the human agent. One view of looking at the human agent, the decision maker, is the one that any of you who has been to a policy school, business school, economics department, most of the social sciences knows well, and it's the rational agent model. It's a view of looking at people that assumes that we're highly rational. We have well-organized preferences. We know what we want. We do the best we can to get it. We're also somewhat self-interested, somewhat selfish. Creeping into this vision, although it's not part of the theory necessarily, is that we care mostly about tangibles, about things you can touch and hold and eat, not just pride. And the implications of all this is, since we know what we want and we do all we can to get it, and we're well informed and we are have self-control, the implication is that basically people maximize their well-being, their utility, if you will. They exploit opportunities anytime they arise, and basically they need no protection from themselves and ought to be left to their own devices. And if you think about the political discussion today, it's a vision that you hear often. Let people do the best they can, just step away and let people organize themselves and maximize their utilities. On the other hand, the other side of this debate is the behavioral and empirical view of the human agent. That's the one I spend my time doing research in. That's the one I'll try to convince you of ought to matter more than it does. And that's people the way we know them. Our friends, our grandmothers, our kids. They're kind of confused and a little vindictive and myopic and jealous, and our judgment is sort of mediocre, and our preferences are not always stable, and we change what we want, and it depends how you describe it, etc., etc. If you look at it that way, people are not always so effective in getting what they want. In fact, we're not even sure we know what we want, and even if we do, we're not always so good at getting to it. And so as a result, we could really use some attention and some help. Notice there's a creeping paternalism here, which when you teach in a policy school becomes legitimately a matter of serious debate. How much paternalism should we allow? Who's going to do it? Who's going to be the potter of this paternalism, etc. So this is the debate, and again, what you will see throughout this magnificent course you're taking is that, and I mean it, I was just saying that in a sense this is such an amazing roster, I'm the only one I haven't heard of in this. These two visions. And what I want to convince you of is that the first one, to a large extent, is at the core of what guides policy and policy making today, how policymakers think about agents. What I want to convince you of is not that I want to engage necessarily in a debate about which is right and which is wrong. Both visions incorporate some important intuitions, but that this one really ought to play a much bigger role when we think about policy. I'll try to convince you what that would mean, what prices we pay when it's not the case, and why it really ought to be a central vision of how we think about agents. So what I'm going to do is start kind of with Psychology 101. I'm going to give you a few minutes of a feel for the kind of studies we do, not just us, and historically as well, that captures this vision of the human agent as sort of, very context-dependent, very malleable, very inconsistent, etc. You can start in many places. I'm going to start actually with a study that sort of entered popular culture. Not always exactly as it ought to have been, but I'll try to give you some good sense. Stanley Milgram arrived to the US from Europe post-World War II, and like many European psychologists, was invested in understanding the German mind. What is it that led Germany allowed the things that happened to happen? He did a bunch of studies. To preempt the conclusion, I can tell you that he found this little bit of the German mind in all of us. And when you see the letters that he writes to the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and other places that are funding him, as the research goes on, he's severely distraught by what he's finding. He set out to find the opposite of what he, in fact, he found, and here is how it goes. He did a bunch of studies, not only him, but here is the classic. He recruits middle-aged men in New Haven, this is in the late 50s, to help in a study. They think that they're randomly assigned to being teachers or learners, but in fact they're all going to be teachers. The learners are going to be confederates, these are people who are working with the experimenter in the study. They meet, here's you seeing the experimenter talking to the teacher. The learner, who's the confederate, is sitting down, he's going to be tied up to some electrodes, they're going to administer some electric shock. And this is a subject who's been recorded in the streets of New Haven. And the story is as follows. You're going to be on the other side of a divide, another room. You're going to teach the learner paired associates, irrelevant, and the task is sort of no consequence. So you teach them paired associates. I teach you shoe, orange. Later I say shoe, you're supposed to say orange. If you don't get it right, I give you a shock. And we move on. This is to get to know, for people to learn the task. Needless to say, you couldn't do this today, etc. Now, the whole thing is very carefully choreographed, and everything is very well explained. The subject sees this machine that he proceeds to administer from left to right in increasing amounts of voltage. And it's all marked, so it goes from mild to severe to dangerous, severe shock to triple X. Everything is very well choreographed, so when the subject administers 75, 90, 105 volts, etc., he hears grunts. At 150, the learner screams, "Get me out of here, I told you I had heart trouble." He does. During the interaction, he happens to mention he has heart trouble. It's 270, this is all the plan, this is the theater. 270 is going to be screams of agony, and from 330 on, there's total silence. So at 330, there's silence, and if you press after that, there's just silence. You say, "Shoo," and nothing comes back, and you press, and you wait, and you do the next task. Now, while this is going on, the experimenter, who is a very distinguished gentleman in a white robe, stands in the corner of the room and says these things. "Please continue, the experiment must go on. It's absolutely essential you continue, you must go on, etc." That's the source of pressure. Now, Milgram, the question, of course, is, at what time will a teacher refuse to go on with this experiment? Milgram asked a bunch of people, including psychiatrists, students, a bunch of other adults. He gave them exactly the description in more detail than you just got, and asked them to predict how people behave. Everyone predicted disobedience. The average prediction was that people would go up to about 135 volts. That's when grunts turn into certain screams of agony. No one predicted that anyone would go above 300, although the psychiatrists, the experts in human behavior, did predict that 1 in 1,000, the true psychopath, would go to 450. Findings. 65% were psychopaths. Every single person went to 300. Now, just so you understand, 65% are people who, after 330, screams of agony, and all the rest, there's no more sound coming from this person with heart trouble, and they keep administering the shock. Now, it's important because I think popular culture, those who've heard about this often misunderstand. People who are getting this shock are not having a good time. I'm not talking sadism here. These are people who are sweating, they're getting up, they're scratching like monkeys, they're getting up, they're sitting down, they're begging to stop. They say this is crazy, you can't go on. And the guy in the white robe in the corner says, the experiment must go on. Please go on. This is it. That's the source of pressure, and they're going on doing this thing. A comment. When you see this, I think it's very hard to resist thinking that you just heard about something that happens to middle-aged men in the 50s. But this is us. And this is something that's important because when you look at Milgram's communication with the NIH and the psychiatrist's predictions, this is a discovery about human behavior. 50 years ago, we simply did not know that this is how people are. People, due to very nuanced contextual pressures that we're not even sure we completely can delineate, enter a mode of behavior that's contrary to their wishes and do things that you would not have ever expected they would do. And this is a real discovery, and a lot of social psych since then has been about this. Has been about essentially the power of the situation, number one, and number two, our tendency to underestimate the power of the situation. The context, the situation has an enormous impact on our behavior, and we just don't get it. So when anybody in this university who's taken Psych 101, or not to mention your advanced courses, reads about Abu Ghraib, if they pass the course, they ought to be able to say, this is not about bad people, this is about profoundly average people in a really bad situation. And it's very hard for us to get to grasp that and the extent to which it can impact behavior. And in a sense, I'll elaborate from this, but this is the major lesson. When we look at policy, when we look how people behave, what they do, the assumption that we walk around with our preferences and sort of go around maximizing those preferences, context independent to some extent, is just not going to be true about people. Minor nuances, and I'll give you some examples, are going to make all the difference. And what I'll try to convince you of is when you hold the rational model view of the human agent, those nuances ought not matter to you. You say to yourself, this is what people care about, this is what they're trying to maximize. It doesn't really matter if somebody's standing in the corner or not. That's not about what some of the story is. Turns out that's what it's all about. And that's captures, in some sense, the flavor of what we'll do next. Now, at the core of the discussion between the rational agent and what you find is a really, really trivial, obvious, but deep fact. When economists and policymakers talk about decisions people make, they talk about situations in the world. You want that salary instead of this salary. You want this outcome instead of that outcome. People want to make choices, and again, I don't want to sound too postmodernist here. This is intended to be a very trivial claim. People can make choices about things in the world. They make choices about things in the world as they're represented in the mind. And this is not one-to-one. There are many ways of seeing in the mind the same thing in the world. So, going back for a second, the guys in Mohegan who were given this electric shock were not in the context that you just saw. They were not saying to themselves, there is some Patsy who is telling me to give shocks and I'm going ahead and do it. They were doing something very different. Now, what exactly they were seeing, nobody, I'm sure, I think really understands yet. But they have a view, their mental representation of the context is very different from the context as objectively seen. And there are many other ways of seeing it. And part of the work in behavioral economics has to do with framing, describing the same outcome in slightly different ways that lead to a very different representation and as a result of very different preferences and very different behaviors. And so I'll get more into that, but this is, in a sense, hides a lot of it right there. So this idea of how we construe the representation, how we make up what we think is going on, is very central to psychology. It's true in visual perception, it's true in survey studies, it's true in social psychology, it's true everywhere. I'll give you a few examples. Okay, the most simple example. We make a lot of judgments every day. Some judgments are very difficult. The probability of withdrawing from Iraq by 2009, probability that Osama bin Laden will be caught alive. Very complicated judgments that people have to make. Some are easier. Here is a very easy one. You ask people to estimate how many hours of television they watch a week. Now notice, if you go on TV, it's 0, and if you never turn it off, it's 170. But for most of us, it's somewhere in there, and we sort of have an idea, and nobody knows it better than you, and so you ask how many you watch. And you can ask it this way, or instead you can ask the following, how many hours of, what's the average number of hours you watch television per week? The question is identical, it just so happens that you use a different scale. And what you find is that the average American watches 10 hours if you ask it this way, and he watches 6 if you ask it this way. Now, notice two things. One, obviously you can use this. If you want to report that Americans watch a lot of television, you use this scale as opposed to that one, etc. But more deeply, how do we ask this question context-free? What would you do? It turns out it's not obvious. There is a way to get your real judgment independent of whatever came before, whatever you're thinking about next, how the scale is used. Notice this is not a conscious decision. People know there are above 2 and below 20. They're trying to make up their minds. Among other things, there is a cue provided by the scale. The cue kind of, silently, implicitly suggests that if I'm a middle American, I'm somewhere around there. And that shifts you just a bit. You wouldn't say 40, but it's enough to move you a bit. Another example. This is really true for undergraduates. You can have other versions for us. You ask undergraduates, how happy are you today? And then you ask them, how many dates have you had in the last week? Or instead, another similar group, how many dates have you had in the last week and how happy are you today? What you get is a correlation of 0.1, almost no connection in the first case, and a very high correlation, 0.7 in the second. You ask people how happy, I don't know how comfortable are your correlations. Basically what this suggests is that if I ask you how happy you are, dates don't come to mind, if I ask that first. If instead I ask you how many dates have you had, and then I ask you how happy you are, I don't know how happy I am, you may mention dates, let me use dates. And dates become a very central feature of your happiness judgment. Again, that's a cute trait, but the next question is, how do you get judgments, which happen to be a very important thing if you're trying to run policy, that are not dependent on what people saw first? What's the true happiness judgment? Should we do it when we first wake up in the morning, before we go to sleep, when we haven't thought about anything? What should we do? If you think about it for a moment, to the extent that our answers so closely depend or are subject to whatever influence came before, there is no context-free happiness judgment. It's all context-dependent in pretty profound ways that have major consequences. Another example, just because I'm fun. Here you ask people to judge how accurate are these aphorisms as descriptions of human behavior. So for example, woes unite foes, what sobriety conceals, alcohol reveals, etc. The second group of subjects, exact same story, but they're provided with the following aphorisms, which a separate group of judges has agreed mean exactly the same thing, except they happen not to rhyme. So, woes unite enemies, what sobriety conceals, alcohol reveals, and masks, etc. Well, people think the ones on the left are much more true about human behavior than the ones on the right. Although, again, they've all agreed it means the same thing, there's an issue of perceptual fluidity. To the extent that it's fluid, to the extent that it's easy to accept, to the extent that we process it painlessly, it acquires truth value, it acquires attractiveness. There are a lot of studies. You show people meaningless Turkish words, unseen heretofore, beforehand, Chinese characters. You show them repeatedly, 200 times. It can be all at once or just hanging posters around campus. And then you compare those to another set, and those that people have seen a lot are now judged more attractive. In fact, you can do this subliminally. I can show you characters for 100 milliseconds, so you never even know it hit you. And I showed to you many times, and that character which you've never seen, you think, is now judged more attractive than a comparable character. So just perceptual fluidity impacts how attractive things are, how true they seem to be, etc. Of course, all of this at some level we're not aware of, because the mental apparatus is doing things that we're not always fully cognizant of. And this is, of course, at the heart of a lot of this debate. There are rational principles that are part of the economic analysis, part of the vision of the rational agent. It should be consistent. If you prefer A to B and B to C, you have to prefer A to C, things like that, which all of us endorse. Except the machine that we have behind the eyes and between the ears does its own thing. It doesn't always owe us to behave in ways that conform to these principles that we endorse upon reflection, and so it does things that don't abide by these, and that's part of the issue. You can see this in perception. I can tell you, please ignore the three-dimensional cues. Just look at the surfaces of these tables. Are they the same or not? Now, if you have a reasonably good picture, you'll be convinced that they're not the same, but the two are identical. In other words, in the age when I used to have overheads, I would put an overhead over one, trace it with a marker, and then move it over to the other, and they're exactly the same. Now, the problem with doing that, even with an overhead, I don't know if I did it here, your visual system is so convinced that these are different, that if you do this in the right setting, you draw the outline of one and move it over to cover the other, people think they're seeing the thing you draw stretch and contract so as to cover the different shapes it's landing on. It's very hard to convince you otherwise. I'm going to try something that I've never tried in this setting. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll try. Do you see anything moving? If it's working for you, you should see things moving. And if you simply focus on any single circle, it will stop. Okay, that's a way to convince yourself that I'm not having any computer tricks here, since you wouldn't be able to stop the computer on the circle you choose to. This is all a visual illusion, and again, there are a lot of these where you ask people to perceive something that they cannot avoid perceiving, etc. The mind is doing its own thing, even when we try to do it once. Okay, I'm not sure it works on the screen, but anyway. So here we have these decision makers walking around with the mental apparatus doing its thing. And it's doing things not always the way we intuit or the way we would like it to do them, with implications for calls. One area where it's very clear is when it comes to decisional conflict. In the standard thinking about choice, when I see a number of options, I basically proceed to assign each of them some personal attractiveness, what economists call utilities. So I look at one and I say this is worth 17 to me. I'll do the next one and I say this is worth 19 to me, and I like 19 more than 17, that's the one I choose. That sort of model has built into it a lot of nice, very attractive features. One, you always maintain ordering. If I prefer one over the other because the number is bigger, I'll always prefer it over the other. And conflict, although you might feel it, really plays no role because you simply take the one that's more attractive. It doesn't matter to you whether it's close or distant or anything like that. Of course, in human behavior, as we know, it's quite different. I'll give you first a very controlled study, then I'll give you some more applied cases. This is to make it clean. So you take subjects and you give them monetary gambles, and they actually get to play for real payoffs. These are Stanford students. So you can take a 65% chance to win $15 or a 30% chance to win $35. You take the one you prefer, you play it, if you win, you win. Now there's two groups, notice. One is a conflict group, one is a dominance. The dominance group has X prime, which is strictly dominated by X, namely it's strictly less good. It gives you the same chance to win less. Okay? So now look at X. X is shared by both groups. So you can think about it this way. They both have X. The conflict group has Y, which is a viable alternative, whereas the dominance group has X prime, which is strictly dominated. So objectively speaking, these guys have a better set in front of them than these guys, who have a wasted option. Now when they see these options, they can either play one, or they can pay $1 to add another alternative, another gamble, from an initial set of 10 that they've seen before. This is to take care of expectations and other things that the theory worries about. So you can either play one of these, or you can pay $1 to add another one to the set. Any standard analysis, if you look at economic treatments of how people look for used cars or for houses, predicts that to the extent of the set in front of you right now is better, you should be less likely to search. And to the extent the set is inferior, you should be more likely to search for it. The way this is structured is intended to look at another feature, namely, this decision is hard. Am I somebody who takes a greater chance at a smaller payoff or a smaller chance at more? This decision is easy. Clearly, X is better than X prime. If you look at people's tendency to search further, what you find is that almost twice as many people pay more to get another option, although they're facing a superior set, but the decision is tough, as opposed to when they're facing an inferior set, the decision is easier. Okay, so this is a very clean way of showing, basically, one of the reasons why people keep looking is not a function of what's available to them, but a function of how compelling an argument they have for making a decision now, as opposed to not being sure which they prefer. And so you can think how this works. If you're at a supermarket, next to the thing you want to sell, you add another thing that's strictly less good. It now makes all of us feel better about buying the original. Because next to it is something that's strictly, smaller and costs more. And marketing uses that thing. It uses it regularly. Notice why this is kind of deep. Because when you look at the item, you're not able to say it's worth 17 utilities to me. You look at it, you try to decide how much it's worth, and the things next to it, the context, the things that it compares to, have an impact on how attractive it looks. And as a result, because of these contextual effects, you can sell more or less depending on your range of shelf. This has been done. This is a study done in a supermarket near Palo Alto. It's one of those places. You all know those sorts of places. It has 300 types of mustard. What they do here is on random days they set up a tasting booth with either 6 jams that people are invited to taste from and buy, or 24 jams. And what you see here is when you set up the 6 jams, 40% of the people stop to taste. When you set up 24 jams, 60% of people stop to taste. But nobody buys. People basically say, I don't know how to make the right decision out of 24 jams. I'll think about it another day. Now, if you look at marketing, if you look at business schools, you'll always stop the opposite. If you're going to open a store for shirts or jams or ties, the more you have, the more likely you are to satisfy the person's utility function, the more likely you are to get one that the person likes. Well, that's true by that model. It's not true for us. For us, as you increase the conflict, people will be more likely to walk out of the store than if you make the decision easier by having just a few options they like as opposed to many. This has been done recently with 401k options for companies, and basically as companies add more options to the 401k selection, for every additional 10 options, you have 2% less participation. Basically, this is also, by the way, it's beautiful work in the credit card market. There's over 1,000 banks that issue credit cards in America today, but all standard models issue have perfect competition. There isn't perfect competition. In fact, it's worse actually to keep the interest rates very high because people will tell you, all I care about is the annual fee. I don't care about the interest rate because I'm not going to pay it. Did you pay it last year? I asked last year, I did, but next year I'm not going to pay it. Anyway, now this is not just true for shoppers, it's also true for experts. Those of you who like sort of academic trivia, there was a 3-page paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, co-authored by 419 fancy physicians. These are North America's, US and Canada's leading experts in carotid endarterectomy. It's a relatively complicated procedure for prophylaxis against stroke. It involves a hole to the throat. Serious stuff, major experts. We got the 419 co-authors, and response, we used fancy medical people to write us a letter, and the response rate was extremely high, over 80% response. And here's what they were asked to do. The operating room is very busy. You have 2 patients. Now, I'm not showing you this to you. There is a long description in medical and real technical lingo about each of these patients. It's a folder. There are these 2 patients. Which of these would you operate on first? Now, I should say, these are all legitimate patients. These are all actual cases of people who merit this operation. It's not like you're operating somebody who shouldn't be operated on. But out of these meritorious cases, the first half of the physicians, 210 of them, see a woman in her early 50s and a man in his early 70s, and have decided to operate on first. And almost 2/3 decide to operate first on the younger woman, 62%, if nothing else, because life expectancy might be one reason, but there are other reasons. It's pretty true. The other half of the physicians see the exact same 2 patients, but now we add another woman in her 50s, so that between these 2 women, it's a very hard decision to make. They're very comparable, medically speaking. And what you see now is that the majority of these experts decide to operate first on the older man. Now, what does it show you? First of all, of course, it shows you that if you're a man in the 70s, you'd much rather have the hospital with 2 young women rather than 1. But it also shows you that these experts who do this full-time and only this and are the world champions can't assign a utility to a patient, a value to a patient. They don't know, is it 17, is it 19? It's very hard to do. They are in a problem-solving mode. They say, how does this compare to the others? And just increasing the tension between these 2 is enough to lead some of them to switch their preference to the older men. Again, it's not a terrible mistake, but it's enough to sway them at this level. So let me take a step back. If you look at economics textbooks, the rational model perspective, this is Samuelson's 14th edition, it's kind of a Bible. What you read is the following. What we assume is that consumers are fairly consistent in their tastes and actions. And they do not flail around in unpredictable ways, making themselves miserable by persistent errors of judgment and arithmetic. Now this is important because notice what Samuelson is doing here is forcing you to choose between two visions. The rational agent or this animal that's flailing around confused. But I'm trying to tell you there's really a different model. These are us. We're not rational, we're not terribly confused. We have a way of doing things. It doesn't conform to the statistical, to the normative requirements, but it's not that we're flailing, doing errors of arithmetic. We're doing our thing pretty well. It just looks a little bit different from the rational agent. And it may help to think about us not as just flawed economists or flawed rational creatures, but as somewhat different creatures with our own way of doing things. And with some obvious implications for policy. Now, when you have this debate in academic circles, at least, often resistance by those who want to push the rational agent view is that, look, a lot of these studies are sort of in a lab, and who knows how it extends to real life, when people have more experience, when the incentives are higher, when they really care, when they stand to lose more, etc. Not doesn't necessarily apply to the physicians and others, but that's a common resistance. And so there are a couple of studies that are trying to look at it at this level as well. I'll describe one to you because I'm particularly enamored of it at the moment. We just finished it recently. This is a study that was done in South Africa. And it's done in South Africa for a reason you will understand immediately. This is a bank that allowed us to randomize the interest rates on loans that are offered people. So people receive a letter from the bank. These are all people who have used this bank for a loan before, at least once, an average of 5 times. They know the bank very well. They receive a letter offering them to apply for a loan. The interest rate on this loan is randomized significantly. It's randomized everywhere between 3.25% to almost 12% monthly. Now, we can debate the ethics of this sort of study. Let me just tell you that everybody in this study is getting a gift relative to market rates. So some are getting a bigger gift, some are less. These are severely predatory lending rates, not unlike outside in our cities, by the way, for some of us, or some of them. These are predatory rates, and in this market, everybody's getting a rate better than they're used to. But they differ enormously, from 3.25% to 12%. In addition to the randomization of the interest rate, we randomize behavioral features. Some people get a picture of a man smiling, some people get a picture of a woman smiling, some people get no picture. Some people get 4 examples of possible loans. Remember we just saw how the proliferation of options creates conflict. Some people get 4 examples of possible loans. Some people get a single example. There is some old studies, so there's studies decades ago, showing that if you offer people a gift that they don't like, they actually might be less prone to buy the item. So if you go into the camera store to buy film, and Kodak is offering some cheap plastic frisbee, you could of course take the frisbee and put it in the garbage, but people say just give me the ag fund instead, which is not intuitive. This bank was offering at times, before we came, the option to participate in some raffle for some cheap cell phone. And I said to them, it's not obvious that the cell phone is doing you any good, and they just couldn't even process the claim. So we included that. Some people are offered a chance to participate in a raffle for a cheap cell phone, and others are not. A lot of these things are randomized. This is almost 58,000 people. It's all for real. These are all had experienced this bank before. The average loan is 1/3 of their income. And what I'm going to tell you now is actually the number of loans given. It's not going to play, it's all totally for real. Okay, yeah, so I'm one step behind. These are some of the behavioral features that we manipulated. We did a lot of other things, but I'm not going to cover them. Okay, some data. For the men in the group, about almost 30,000 people, the women less, in this case we can talk about it later, having a picture of a woman smiling here, as opposed to not, was worth 4.5 percentage points monthly. It's a lot of money. Now, I don't know if I told you this. Economics, by the way, is right. As you increase the interest rate, the number of people who come for the loan diminishes, as economists would predict. So interest goes up, less people show up. However, having said that, you add a picture of a woman here, you can increase interest rate by 4.5 percentage points monthly and keep the same thing. Putting 4 options rather than 1 hurts you almost 2.5 percentage points. Am I right? Yeah, 2.3 percentage points. So basically, Too many examples, sort of aversive. Take a few away, put only one, you can increase interest rate and have the same take-up. Offering this cheap cell phone hurts you 4 interest points worth. Taking the cell phone away, you can increase interest rate, etc. Again, this is for real, a third of their income. These things really matter to people.
Did you only look at whether people came back for a loan, or did you have some way of trying to control for the size of the loan?
It's all very well organized in the sense that anybody who shows up gets the loan, and they get the size they ask for, up to a certain general limit that's mandated not just by us. But basically, there's no selection procedure. Anybody who shows up gets it. This is the implications, and it has the implications, of course. This is we're talking about loans in the context of poverty, pretty much. The interest rates are very high. I should also mention that gender differences. For example, the women are a little less prone to these effects. I wouldn't generalize it. This is a context, for example, where the women are more responsible homemakers than the men. Maybe probably that. It's a complicated story we can come back to. But it leads to, I want to go a little bit more applied now to more policy issues. Think about our view of the poor, behavior of the poor. If you look at literature, at least, there are kind of 2 predominant views. One says the poor are just like the rest of us. They're rational, they do all they can to maximize their situation given circumstances, calculated expectations, etc. The other view says culture of poverty, pathology, myopia, lack of planning, lack of education, etc. Those are the 2 views in the debate on poverty. Now, notice everything we just seen, there is an alternative. The alternative is that the poor might be neither rational, since none of us are, nor pathological, they may be healthy humans. And the question is, if we look at poverty that way, how much sense can we make of things that seem otherwise impossible? And I'll give you a couple of intuitive examples, and I won't get into the details here. Look at the unbanked. There are millions of people in America today who do not have a bank account. Not having a bank account is not a good thing as a citizen in America. It limits you enormously. Every bill you have to pay, you have to go and pay the check casher for high rates. Basically, a poor American who just wants to pay their bills and take care of things can pay up to $300 a month just for services of paying. Not to mention everything else. You can't take a credit card, you can't do driver's license, and the rest of this thing. So it's very hurtful not to have a bank account, and the question is, why would people not have a bank account? There's sort of, let's go back to the 2 views. The rational view says, look, the poor have done the standard rational cost-benefit analysis. They've understood the situation. They've calculated what it means, and they've decided that for them the bank is too expensive, it's too far, they don't have enough to save, it's not worth it. What are the policy implications? We've got to move the banks closer. We have to subsidize the accounts. We have to do whatever policies we can to give incentives to the poor or force the banks to lower the cost, raise the incentives, do something so the cost-benefit analyses would change. Okay? What's the pathological explanation? The pathology explanation says, look, the poor just don't get it. They don't understand, they don't know enough about banks. They may mistrust institutions, they may not understand the logic of the whole thing, they have their own values, they don't understand about saving, they're myopic, etc. What do we do then? We have to change their values, we have to inculcate new values, we have to educate their children from a young age, etc. That's sort of the debate, and it's like a Mickey Mouse version of the debate today. Now notice, what's common to these 2 views that you notice is, with a major problem, there's a major cause. Either the banks are too far away to move them, or the poor just don't get it, and we have to do very large interventions to change it. What we're trying to do now in some of our research is a slightly different view that says, look, if you take behavioral insights seriously, we've already seen a number of cases where minor contextual nuances make a big difference. Like the Yale researcher in the corner making such a big difference. What can we think about in the context of poverty, which is not a simple one, that might lead to behaviors that we're seeing that could be explained in very different ways? Another major researcher, again, German post-World War, is Kurt Lewin, who talked a lot about channel factors. Channel factors are these small changes to the context that you make that alter behavior, or that make a change, a difference, bigger than you anticipate. To give you an example of a classic channel factor study. This was a while ago when this was relevant. They go to college students and lecture to them about the merits of tetanus shots, why you should have a tetanus shot. After the lecture, half of them are told, the infirmary is down outside the campus, please go when you can get a shot. The other half of the students, after the same lecture, get a map of campus with an infirmary circle and a time of day, an hour, when the students said they're able, where they're supposed to go and get it. The rate of getting a shot goes from 3% among those who just were told to go do it to 30%, tenfold, for those who had an app in the time. That's a channel factor. It's just saying to you, don't leave it for any time, do it now. Now, all of you, although it might sound sort of amazing, you could think of cases in your lives where this is true. So I submit, nobody's done the research. I wish somebody had, because I'm sure it would work. I think all of us, before the age of VCRs, saw our favorite television shows more than we do now, which sounds paradoxical. It used to be that if you wanted to see Mission Impossible at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, it was then or never, so you were there at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Now, you record it, you put it on the shelf, and you decide to see it at the right time. And it's never the right time to see it. That's a channel factor. So they do this, and they get people to do more, to get more tetanus shots. Now let's look at the unbanked. I say to you, look at the ethnographic studies of inner city America today and the behavior of the poor and the unbanked. I say to you, plenty of descriptions, there's plenty of studies about this. You are a poor American walking into a bank, let alone a young black American. The guard gets up, everybody gets organized, it's a very unpleasant feeling. You have single mothers describing, they don't have babysitters, they take the babies in the bank, and they say to you, I know I'm not supposed to have a crying baby in the bank. I don't feel good, they're all looking at me, I don't want to meet her like this. Things like that. Small contextual nuances that are unpleasant to the person. Maybe that's why people don't go to the bank. And notice, it's not that I've decided I'm not going to get a bank account. They're just saying, not today. When I have a babysitter, when I have a chance, I'll do it. But today, it's aversive to it. If you say that, the policy analyst, classical economist trained in rational analysis, says to you, you've got to be kidding me. We've just agreed that these people have done a cost benefit. They've understood, presumably, why banks are important. And you tell me that these people have understood why banks are important because of 20 minutes of shame or unpleasantness would give up a lifetime of savings. That makes no sense at all. Well, let's go elsewhere. Let's look, for example, at medical self-exams. If you go to physicians who teach about medical self-exams, people go around the country explain to people how you should do, why you should self-administer testicular cancer exam, breast cancer exams, etc. It takes a few minutes, it's very important, etc. Those physicians don't self-administer those exams. Why don't they? Embarrassment, perceived unpleasantness, don't have the time, another bit. Now notice, these are experts in medical self-exams. We're talking about 2 minutes in the shower, in the privacy of your own shower, and they say, not today. They're highly rational, they're super educated. Why wouldn't it be the case that a poor American says, half an hour in an unpleasant bank? Not today. It doesn't contradict anything about human behavior. It lends a whole different perspective to what you ought to do to increase banking. You don't have to move the bank, you don't have to educate these guys. You just have to make it a little bit more pleasant. Maybe get a babysitter, see what happens. That sort of thing. Well, we've tried a few things, there's a lot more to do. There's a wonderful place in Chicago, Center for Economic Progress, that together with Shore Bank in Chicago has tried to encourage the unbanked to open a bank account. So now the way it works, in this case, you get a tutorial on how to fill out your taxes. A lot of these people stand to get refunds in tax time. And so the inducement is open a bank account, you get the refund within 48 hours. It's very attractive, a lot of them open bank accounts. There's a promo, of course, because they empty the account completely in 5 minutes and there's nothing left and we're back to where we started. The bank is not very happy. If you look at this program, there's a little bit less than a 50% take-up. So those who come for the 2-hour tutorial on tax filling, almost 50% open a bank account, which is remarkably, it's an effective program. What's interesting is if you call these people who have been to the training and ask them what about a bank account, over 90% say they were convinced by the tutorial and intended to open it. So you can look at it both ways. Almost 50% open, but over 90% intended to get a bank account after hearing this tutorial. They were convinced they thought it was good, just like the students about the tetanus shots. So what we did here is we had people come as before for a 2-hour tutorial, but now there are 2 groups. The control group, as before, gets the tutorial, They're then told there's Shore Bank uptown, please go and open an account. The experimental group, same story, but now instead of having to go to Shore Bank uptown, there's a Shore Bank representative right here in the room on the other side. And now the opening of bank accounts goes away. Now, at some level, this is trivial, it shouldn't surprise you. But notice again, if you were doing cost-benefit analyses, if you were saying, I've now determined that having an account is important to me, then it shouldn't be the difference between going uptown by bus or having a person there. It's a minor, it's a small transaction cost. But in fact, what we're seeing is, it does make a difference. It's like getting a babysitter. You make that one transaction easier, and you get more uptake of the bank accounts than if it was hard for the same people with the same values and the same set of considerations. There's beautiful work by Dick Thaler and his colleagues in Chicago on increasing savings. Thaler here basically relies on two very insightful principles in behavioral economics. One is loss aversion. People hate losses. That's not surprising, but they hate losses more than they like gains. So losing 100, as it were, hurts people more than winning 100 makes them happy. That has very interesting implications. I will jump a few steps here, but let me tell you the following. People hate getting nominally lesser money in their checks than they did before. They hate nominal cuts. Getting a smaller nominal raise is a whole different story. So what Thaler does to them is he says, can you put more money into savings? And they say, no, I can't. I'm living day to day. I cannot save anymore. He says to them, no problem. Are you willing to agree that next time you get a raise, a certain proportion of the raise, say 50% of the raise, goes into your savings? Notice you're getting more, just less more than otherwise. People say, no problem. In addition, he says to them, which helps, if you join this program, any day you want to, you can withdraw. 24/7, you call, you're out. No problem. No commitment. This he does because of what we know is very strong status quo bias. All of you who chose a certain package with Verizon or with your cable TV and said, I'll think in a month whether to keep it or change it, never thought about it again. That's a status quo bias. So Thaler says to them, no problem. You can get out anytime you want, and you never get a cut in your salary, you just get a smaller raise anytime you get a raise. People say, fine. He's been running these programs with major corporations for years now, and people's savings are going up drastically. These people who said they couldn't save before, and these are two small principles that make all the difference. So I'm trying to give you here is a sense of a couple of studies where life is the same, but manipulating the contextual factors, the channels in small ways, getting not a nominal cut, but a smaller nominal raise, having the bank representative not across town tomorrow, but right here now, make a difference that standard policy intuitions would not always predict. I'll give you a little personal anecdote that kind of captures it in a visual sense. When I was a graduate student, I was at a lecture once on local Altima, computer science doesn't matter. And halfway through the lecture, I realized something quite interesting. For the last 3 years, I was living in Cambridge somewhere. For the last 3 years, every morning I'd get up from home and walk a certain way to school. In the evening, I'd go back a different route. Now, there was no views, there was no danger, there was no uphill. All I wanted to do is a very ugly part of Cambridge. All I wanted to do is get home and to school, nothing else. But I was taking opposite routes, and if you look at a map, I was sub-optimizing. I was taking a longer route, by about 200 meters every afternoon, half the time. What was I doing? What I was doing is I never asked myself, what's the shortest distance? That's the global perspective that all the rational analysis assumes you do. What I did is I got up in the morning and started walking. There was this very strange garage on the way, and locally, when I got here, this felt like going backwards, this felt like going forwards, I took a lift. When I left school the other day, I got here, this felt like going backwards, this felt like going forward, I took a lift. And by locally doing what felt best here and there, I globally took opposite routes. This you see in human behavior all the time. We look at our checking account and say, this is the best for me. We'll look at our savings account and say, this is the best for me. How the two sit together, we rarely observe. So one thing you get, by the way, all those who I told you that who don't care about interest rate for the credit cards, in 1991 American Economic Review article that last I saw estimated that 2/3 of all active credit card accounts were paying an interest on approximately $1,000 an average a month. Major numbers. A lot of these people had enough money to pay it in the bank. So they're holding money in their checking or savings account for which they get 3%, and they're owing the same amount of money which they have to the credit card company for which they're paying 20, and they feel like everything is fine. This is doing local optimization, not global. And it's everywhere. I'll give you a couple examples that are very clear. Here's a beautiful recent study. This is a graph that shows you the percentage of willing organ donors in European nations. What percentage of drivers, particularly, are organ donors? Now, the blue countries average about 95%. The yellow countries average about 15%. You ask yourself, what's the difference in the yellow and blue countries? It's not easy to see because Austria is on one side, Germany is on the other, Netherlands on one, Belgium on the other. You know, not obvious what the differences are. But now we know the differences. The blue countries are opt-out countries. You have to sign your license not to be a donor. The yellow countries are opt-in countries. You have to sign your license to be a donor. Signing a license, you could, now, two countries actually have to apply for a form. But basically, the transaction cost, what the economists call transaction cost, is minimal. We're talking about your body, about your family's dealing with it. It's not like buying orange juice, this is your body. 95 to 15%, just because you have to either opt in or opt out. People sit. It's the status quo. They don't take action. There's a perception, possibly, that if this is the option, then the country recommends it. Who am I to opt out? If this is the option, that's what's recommended. Who am I to opt in? Maybe there's a little bit of that. But whatever's going on, people just don't take that action. So whatever you decide is the default is what most people stick to. Now this is kind of deep because in the standard rational thinking, there are two options: to be an organ donor or not to be. And those are the two available to you. You should choose between them. There's no difference where you come from. If you come from being until you sign, or from coming from not being until you sign. In people's lives, the difference is enormous. And you can see what role this plays in policy. I talked to you a little bit about paternalism initially. People refer to this as benign or libertarian paternalism in the following sense. If you run a country, you say, I don't want to take any options away from people. They ought to be able to continue to choose whether they want to opt in or they want to opt out. But for those who can't bother to think about it, I'll decide what's the better option. Hire the Ministry of Health or somebody. And many of us would probably agree that this is a better default for those who can't bother to switch. Those who want to switch, of course, we're not limiting their options. But if they're not going to bother, we should design them one way or the other. By the way, a very similar example to this in the no-fault auto insurance. So New Jersey and Pennsylvania, when these were first introduced, were exactly like this. You have to opt in one state and opt out in the other, and the number of drivers choosing no fault was drastically different to the tune of $200 million a year, just like that. Just for a class recently I collected, so I'll share with you a very nice recent example. This is the No Child Left Behind. Many people don't know. For a school to qualify for federal funding for No Child Left Behind, you have to supply the names of all juniors and seniors who are graduating from high school to the military forces for recruitment. Now, there's a fair proviso. Every parent is allowed to request that the name of their child not be submitted. Perfectly fine. Most schools send parents a note saying, we're receiving federal funds under the No Child Left Behind, you have to submit your kid's name. Feel free to send a note saying, feel free to opt out. Feel free to say you don't want the kid's name submitted and we won't do it. Some places are kind of interesting. There's a place in Rochester, a district where instead of sending you this letter, you get a 48-page yearly calendar. And somewhere between March and April, for page 14 and 15, is the story that you can opt out. So you can imagine, very few people felt that way. But a couple of places, sophisticated school districts, realized this and said the following. We're going to send parents the form. They can choose whether to opt in, whether they want the child's name to be sent or not. If they don't send us the form back, we're going to assume they don't want it to be sent. So de facto arranging is so now you have to opt in. In one case, if you don't send it back, your child's name goes to the military forces. In the other case, if you don't send it back, it does not go. So it's a classic opt-in versus opt-out. You think there's going to be a difference? Yeah. 94 to 2%. 94 to 2% of the names get sent to the Army, depending on whether parents have to opt in or opt out. Now, notice, by the way, Have we learned anything about people's attitudes toward the military forces? Nothing. All we know is that people don't send the letters back. That's what we've learned. If they have to send back to say yes, they don't say yes. If they have to send back to say no, they don't say no. And so what you get is this. Notice it's almost like out of a book in the sense that it's Fairfield and Fairport. And you couldn't create a more similar name if you wanted to. Beautiful. Anyway, just one, you don't read all this, but one footnote. It's a beautiful case because the military that's heard about this now hates this. And they want it to be done one way or the other. Turns out you cannot say, in the language of policy that we have today, you could not say, I'm allowing opt-out and opt-in without signing the bizarre. It's just not part of the parlance, not part of the lexicon. What do you mean, opt-in, opt-out? What are you even talking about? If you look at the military, it's funny, they're trying to say it, they don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't seem just bizarre and suspicious. So it's an active debate and it's not resolved. I'm going to skip this. Some of what I'm telling you is not new. This is a quote that's almost 100 years old, a very important economist, Lewis Clark. The economist, or the policy analyst, or for that matter, if you want the lawyer, the doctor, the father, the sister, all of us, may attempt to ignore psychology, but it is sheer impossibility for him to ignore human nature. If the economist, the lawyer, the policy analyst, whoever, ignores his conception of man from the psychologist, his constructive work may have some chance of remaining purely economic in character. But if he does not, he will not thereby avoid psychology. Rather, he will force himself to make his own psychology, and he will be that psychology. And that's, in a sense, this I'm going to tell you. There is the intuitive stuff people make up, but just not true about us very often. It leads to terrible policy. I'll give you a couple of examples of what bad policy might be like. A theoretical example and a practical example. If you take a course of welfare economics, for example, one of the principles you'll learn right away is parental optimality. Parental optimality basically says, if there is a state of this world, of a world, in which everybody here is doing at least as well or better, we should switch to that state. So if some people can do better there than they are now, and nobody's doing worse, that state is parental optimal over this one, we should switch. Now, at some level, some logical level, this is unassailable, it's certainly true. But what you often see is this gets translated to money. And it just so happens that in money, this is just not true. So there are many studies of this sort. If I gave 10% of the people in this room 100% raise, and the rest of you 5%, well-being in this room will have gone down, not up. Because for people, part of gauging our well-being is relative to our neighbors, to other people who do the same job we do, etc. The fact that you give me a 5% raise is not enough to make me happy. If somebody who is just as qualified as I am doing the same thing gets twice as much. So parental optimality actually, at the level of dollars, is easy to violate, although it's never discussed that way. It's assumed that if everybody's making more, it's a better state of the world. A more applied example, it's an amazing example. The two-tier welfare system was the law in 17 states until a few years ago. It was stricken down by the Supreme Court for completely separate reasons having to do with the violation of the freedom to travel. And the majority opinion written by Clarence Thomas is actually amazing to see. He laments having to give up this magnificent piece of legislation. Let me tell you about it. The two-tier welfare law basically said, if you're a welfare recipient, say a mother of two, who moves from state A to state B, if state B pays higher welfare than state A, you are entitled to state A's, the lower level payments for the first 12 months of residence. Now this is done, of course, to avoid massive migration of welfare recipients from lower to higher paying states. Now, interesting couple of observations here. If you were a little bit less sure of yourself doing this policy, you could do something very similar, very simple. You could say, why don't we go and see what mobility was like from lower to higher paying states compared to mobility from higher to lower paying states before we introduced this law. If you look, you'd find that it's equal. Nonetheless, you impose this law to avoid this massive migration. Notice the law basically assumes that a mother of two who's receiving welfare somewhere is surfing the web looking for the one who's paying the most. Now, most of these people move because they have a job, they have a babysitter, a sister who can help, something. Now notice what happens. If you're a mother of two who moved because she got a job or a babysitter, this is an example of $93. If you're a mother of two who moved from Mississippi to California, under the two-tier welfare law, instead of 565, which was barely enough to subsist in California, you're getting 120 for a year, which guarantees your demise. So you have a law built in, based on the idea that people are moving around to collect more money. If they're not, and there's plenty of reason to think they're not, then you've guaranteed their failure. That's theory-based, that's policy based on bad psychology. It's an assumption you understand what's moving people when you really don't. Yeah.
But it seems to me that the assumption is really correct. It's just that when people move, they don't only take into consideration the amount of welfare they're going to get, they're also taking into consideration their self-interest in other areas and adding up this whole column of benefits, you know, some which are family, but they're adding the whole column of benefits, and they still then act rationally to move to where their own personal benefits are highest.
This is a very good comment. In other words, notice a lot of what I'm saying here doesn't, in principle, show the normative analysis to be necessarily wrong. All it assumes is that there's things here that are being ignored. So, I don't know if you all have heard this, the idea here is, look, it's perfectly possible for this mother of two to have moved from wherever she was, from 120 in Mississippi, to a place that requires stuff that's 565, although she knew she would continue to get 120, because other things entered her calculation which made it worthwhile. And it's a perfectly reasonable theoretical thing to check. Now, there's plenty of evidence that people move not knowing. And that's the slide I skipped, by the way, and I'll still skip it, but just to tell you, we're doing a lot of work with the Homeless Services Department in New York City. They have a massive organization with a budget of $700 billion a year, $1 million a year, on what people know. There are a lot of laws that go into effect after massive work by lawmakers intended to influence the behavior of the client. So if you receive shelter in New York City, you get a very generous stipend that's built so that every year you get 20% less. It's intended to drive you to go get a job. Now, the question is, what if you don't know about this? You, the recipient, doesn't know about this 20% decrease. All this law went into effect to influence your behavior. If you don't know, nothing's going to happen. And that's what we're looking at now. A lot of them, you arrive at the welfare in the middle of the night after your crazy husband threw you out, and somebody tells you this, and then you move into a home. Do you remember this a week later? Interesting question. Now, they try to remind you, they try to send you pamphlets. What's very clear is that a lot of people don't know this. And in the case of the welfare, again, a very good point. It's certainly possible you can have cases where the cost benefit was such that despite this giant decrease, it was still worth it. But it's probably not the case. And one of the things, by the way, mobility didn't change. So there's many ways to think about the fact that it may not be the whole story, but it's a perfectly reasonable thing to consider. Two more slides, I'll finish soon. Apropos bad psychology, there are cases where it's not entirely obvious whether it's, bad intuition or some sort of, let's call it malice for now, or what's going on exactly, but there are cases where you find a remarkable lack of insight when it comes to offering some plans and benefits. A beautiful place to look is in applications. This is the Second Harvest. Second Harvest did a study on applications for food stamps. Here's one example. It's not a random example, it's a particularly extreme example, but it captures the point. This is an application for food stamps. It's 36 pages long. It's written at a very high level. Let me read you a paragraph from this. I'm not sure if you can read it well. This is a paragraph from this 36 pages. If you're a non-citizen, sorry, I can't. Okay, no, I'll first do it. And I'll try it. Let me read you a paragraph from this application. If you are a non-citizen applying for Medi-Cal and you are not A, LPR, an alien who is a lawful permanent resident of the U.S., B, an amnesty alien with a valid and current I-688, or C, FUCO, an alien permanently residing in the U.S. under color of law, please do not fill in the shaded box for birthplace. None of us know just what happened right now. This is really supposed to do now. I've after you do 20 pages of these, they remind you that you're signing this under the penalty of perjury. So if there are mistakes, don't forget there's perjury waiting. Then, tell me when was the last time you read this. Please be prepared to spend several hours from 7:30 till noon or longer completing the intake process. You will not be seen if you're 6 minutes late. So here you're seeing a potential recipient for food stamps being treated as a PhD, a criminal, and a child. And what they say is, you know what, not today. Take home food stamps is way low. It's a puzzle in the world of policy why there's not more take-up of benefits. People don't take food stamps. Why don't they take food stamps? Well, this may be why. Notice, again, it's important to notice, if you did cost-benefit analysis and decided this is right for you, so it's another bad application, big deal. But that misses the point. It misses the point that we don't do cost-benefit analyses this way. If it's aversive right now, if you can't decide which jam to take, you just say, I'll do it another day. These are people who haven't said to themselves, by the way, if you look at the elderly in medical research, one of the biggest problems about the elderly is there are an enormous number of people who are eligible for a medical procedure, which they know about, the doctor told them. Many of them, 10% have done it. You go to the other 90% and say, what's the story? They're doing it too. Just, haven't done it yet, they'll do it. It's important to realize that people who don't have food stamps, people who haven't done the medical procedure, they're not people who thought about it carefully and said no. There are people who thought about it in passing and said, not today. And not today means that 90% are still waiting and people don't have food stamps because this application is easy to trigger a not today sort of reaction. We're doing some research at the Crisis Ministry in Trenton. They're very, very kind to us and doing research, but it's nothing not worth talking about right now. What I want to do is finish and we can talk, and those who want to go back, but I want to break it with something. So just to conclude some of what we've seen so far, there's a lot of work on consumer literacy. It's kind of a mild, I'm not blaming anybody, it's not intentional, but there's a mild form of blaming the victim. Things are not going well, you say consumers are not literate enough. Let's teach them more. Now, when you saw the physicians in the counter-hysterectomy case, you couldn't teach them more anything. They're the world champions. They're just doing the same thing. At some point, of course, there are people who need to teach more. But that's not the whole story. At some point, it's not teaching the consumer anymore, it's teaching the policymaker. And at some point, you have to realize that policymakers, and all of us, by the way, need to get more sophisticated about our intuitions and understanding about what motivates and drives people and makes them do what we do. And it's not always intuitively available to the senses. It's something you have to kind of understand and train yourself in. Context, construal matter a lot, and mild things influence construal in ways that are just not intuitively immediately available to us. It's often the very small, silly things, the nuances of what the experimenter stands, how many gems are on the shelf, what options are next to the patient you're about to operate, whether the bank representative is there or not, that make a difference. And a lot of policymakers in Washington today have been trained to think that those little things, since they don't impact cost-benefit analyses, ought not matter. And so we're built to miss a lot of what matters. Okay, I'm going to stop there and then we can make it more fun.
Prescription drug benefit plan for Medicare and makes it so complicated. Do you think they take into account that it's so complicated that people really won't choose it because they won't do it today?
We are actually in the advanced stages of getting CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid offices, to let us do the research on this. It's a very complicated story. Basically, they have now agreed. So think about the South African letters I showed you. We were hoping to send letters to people where we vary the information. We can frame in terms of losses and gains, all kinds of things we can do that are behaviorally significant, to see how we can impact take-up. CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid offices, are now willing, for every individual's ID that we send them, to tell us, yes, no, the person took the program, took the Medicare, the drug insurance, which is a major step. What they're now willing to do is give us the names. So now we're negotiating with another company to give us names to call, which we can then send CMS to know whether they took up or not. In other words, you're basically touching the drug benefit program is one of the biggest benefit programs to hit the American market in 30 years. It's estimated, which is probably means it's going to cost much more, to cost $750 billion over the next decade. And the question is, and the big fear, and the gentleman here is raising an important point, the big worry is that the take-up won't be so high. And now this touches the issue I showed you earlier with food stamps. There's often sort of a conflicting incentives issue. A lot of people provide these benefits are not so crazy to have everybody take them. So you get into these complicated situations where, you know, people who design this food stamp application are they ignorant or are they doing a beautiful job of sending people away? You know, it's subtle. I think that the Division of Labor often solves this. Very often, people who are responsible for packaging the application are distant enough from those who are paying for it that they really want it to work. And so this is a case where I think there is a genuine, I don't know enough about this, but I think there is a genuine desire to increase take-up, but it could be a very complicated story, I completely agree. We're actually doing a small experiment on the Princeton campus right now with the help of the benefits office. It's a great example, and I can't get into it because there could be potential subjects in this room. I'll tell you about it in a year. But it's a nice case because this is a case where everybody has an incentive for this to go through. Faculty and staff were offered this benefit. It's really good for them. The benefits office is dying for take-up to go up because that's considered success. The university will end up paying less tax the more people take it. Everybody wants it. Take-up is about 17% right now. This is an old program. And so you clearly can see cases where this account does not enter. But there are certain cases where it does. That's right. Yes?
Have they studied mail-in rebates? That seems to be a thing that instead of giving a
Absolutely.
discount.
It's a major topic in marketing. And one of the things people just lose them. So for example, you in ski resorts, it's very common. You get these passes that, for a lifetime. They know the next time you go up there, you leave it on a mountain. So there's a lot of work on rebates. There is, by the way, a little bit of the channel factor issue I mentioned, which is paradoxically, the less time you have to do it, the more likely you are to do it than if you have longer. If you have a rebate that's good for 10 years, it goes into that drawer from which nothing comes out. Whereas if you have a week, you sort of remember to do it. Not perfectly, but more. So there's a lot of work in terms of deadlines, what they mean. We know with students, very often if you give them a shorter deadline for optional work, you get more back than if you give them a longer deadline. Because, the more you wait, first of all, you notice you waited, which already implies something, and then other things intrude and other things capture your attention. But yeah, in the world of marketing, by the way, the behavioral stuff I'm showing you is certainly becoming much more popular in business schools. And in marketing in particular, they're much more attuned to what drives shoppers like you in the supermarket. And when you go in there, everything is planned. Where the cereals are, what comes out, what comes at the bottom, how much they pay for the top shelf, early, late, in the middle. Yeah, they're not always right, but it's all theory guided. And a lot of it is about what drives people's behavior in this way. And there's a lot of dominant options inserted just to make the ones next to them look better. Williams Sonoma for a while was trying to sell some ridiculously expensive items in barbecue set. And it was going very badly, and then they wanted to get rid of the stock. They introduced another that was just way worse. And sales went up when they were it works.
Yeah, subliminal fluidity that you were talking about. Is that what is going on with our incumbents, political incumbents having a much better chance of being reelected? Like, if we subliminally see and hear Bush so many times, does he have a leg up because he's front and center so much?
Thank God subliminal is not all there is, but yes, that, the other things going on. But certainly the incumbents benefit from being known. The Bushes and the Kennedys benefit before they show up from the name being known. So a lot of that, at some level, by the way, it's not subliminal. We know that we know Kennedy. But the recognition that fluidity does benefit them. Now, of course, no, these are, some of the effects I'm describing are, experimentally show the effect, but aren't always enormously powerful. So there's also things that we know, things that we care about, that may conflict with the recognition of the name. But all else being equal, if you take Bush and a twin Bush with a different name, Bush is more familiar and therefore more recognizable and more fluid. Absolutely. And you know, when you see billboards all over the place, the fact that you're bombarded with Pepsi or Coke has an impact. You know, they all know it. It's, you know, they're paying a lot for this. But yes, you know, there's an enormous amount of mental life going on that we're not aware of that could be quite funny. And you know, you can teach about automatic processing and subliminal perception and very funny things that people just don't know about. To give an example, things happen to our body. We get agitated, we get excited. We don't always know why. So we come up with stories. And it will be quite funny. I'll give you one good one, the famous study. They sent a woman researcher to interview guys on some campus where there's a very wobbly rope bridge over a kind of a scary precipice. She comes up to the guys in the control condition just before they get on the bridge, and the experimental condition on the bridge itself. She comes up and asks them some silly question, thanks them, and gives them her card in case they have any questions. Now, here's the point. When you're on top of this bridge, there's a lot of adrenaline pumping. It's a very uncomfortable situation. People look around, they see this woman, they think it's her. If you ask them, people on the bridge find her more attractive than people just before the bridge, and are more likely to call her later. So there's things happening to their bodies that we just misinterpret. I always tell the students, if you're working out in the gym, and somebody really groovy comes in, wait an hour. What's happening that we don't know? They give people, they're starting with, the story's long, they basically get people to hold their pencil in their mouth, for whatever reason. Half the people are let to hold the pencil with their lips, thus leading them to frown. The other half are asked to hold the pencil with their teeth, thus inducing a smile. They're then asked to judge how funny cartoons are, and those holding the pencil with their teeth think the cartoons are funnier than those holding them with their lips. So, you know, there are things happening to us we just don't understand. They give people a simple puzzle. Half of them are given a very small chair, so you're induced to sit very erect in doing it. The other are given a very tall chair, so you're kind of slouched. Those on a small chair are more proud of their success than those who are slouched. And on and on and on. Subliminal perception is very big. There are things impinging on the senses that are impacting the messages we think we get that we just misinterpret. And certainly recognition of names as well. Yeah.
I think at the beginning of your lecture, you mentioned you use the term paternalism to as sort of something somebody might use to address some of the behavioral aspects of humans. But there is a behavioral aspect that you left off of your list, and that is the tendency to be it's easy for humans to be defrauded. We're easily tricked. And I don't view it as paternalistic when the government institutes standards and other kinds of mechanisms to contain that kind of dishonesty. It's really fraud, right? So, for example, we have had labels with food additives, with foods, you know, the kinds of things that are in food contents, but they're very incomplete. And one of the things that some people want to address is whether there's genetically modified contents in the foods that they're eating, right? And our government refuses to make that a law here, but in other countries, that's on the label. My point is that addressing a lot of the behavioral aspects that you're talking about, if we consider the behavior of corporations, right, that fund this kind of research, you know, and get into it, as fraud, which is really what it is, because they're misrepresenting, they're using, you know, our psyches to trust that implicitly we trust the environment. We want to trust the environment. And we don't really have a government and a culture really in America that says, hey, we really should contain that kind of fraud?
I'm with you. I think, there's a continuum. Even America does, forces you to wear a seatbelt and a helmet. And now the argument by many is that we're allowed to force you when misbehaving costs all of us. So the helmet, if you don't wear a helmet, I have to pay for your medical expenses. That's too far. As long as I don't have to pay for it, the argument goes you should be left to your own devices. Very much the argument that people know what's best for them. Now, you correctly point out, even America puts some limits. Most Western nations, certainly in Europe, put more. I think the more you understand about people's actual behavior, the more it licenses you to put more. In other words, subliminal advertising is actually outlawed, is against the law. I'm not allowed to show you on TV things that you cannot tell you saw. And you all know, many of you know, there's a couple of cases that people have been caught and they claim that the naked bodies were totally by chance on these ice cubes and never meant it. But that's outlawed. A lot of the things you see about advertising really seems to imply that there's other things that I can do to you that's not subliminal, that's just as full of impact. So the point about subliminal is you don't know what happened to you. My point is there's so much more you don't know that's happening to you. You might see it, but you don't know what's happening to you. Just the examples I gave you about the pens and the bridges. So certainly if you take that seriously, along the same lines that forbid subliminal advertising, you should be able to forbid a lot more. But that's a view of the human agent that's much more sophisticated than the one we hold, which is, as long as you know it's there, you will take care of it, you rational man. And of course, that's not how it works. So, yes, I mean, that's right. And, it gets more tricky in the sense that, take predatory lending, 10 miles from here. I think it hurts all of us. Now, there is a view that says, let them do what they do and people will take care of it. When people borrow at 500%, it's hurting everybody. And some places it's more forbidden, some places, some states have stricter laws than others, etc., of course. So, self-control is an amazing story. In casinos today, I actually only learned this recently. I don't remember the term. It's a well-known term among casino managers. People come to the casino and say, hello, I please request you not to let me in anymore. And they say, please sit down, you fill out a form to take your picture, and the next day when you try to sneak, they catch you and send you away. These are people who kind of lack the self-control, and they know that, many of them don't know or are not able to do this, but if you could, you come and say, please don't let me in when I come tomorrow. And then you actually try to sneak in and catch you in the whole story. But self-control is an amazingly complicated story. Cigarettes, alcohol, everywhere. And, the assumption by most policy circles is that, we're rational, we'll take care of it, nobody needs to help us. With sometimes severe consequences. So, I will do a lot more paternalism. Although I recognize the fear on the other side. When I say I will do paternalism, I fully admit that my vision of who will do it is somebody I like. What guarantees that?
My point is, it's not really paternalism. Preventing fraud isn't paternalism.
Fair enough. That's what. Yeah.
I actually have 3 questions.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm going to say them as quickly as I can. How can subliminal fluidity be used when designing messages about the economy and political messages that address public policy issues, such as welfare, workfare, early childhood, etc.? And how can policymakers assess question number two, how can policymakers assess the trivial things that affect public policy and the implementation of public programs? And finally, number 3, when is paternalism appropriate and how should it be controlled?
Well, the subliminal thing, let me say it from the start. I'm not proposing that everything that can be done to people ought to be done to people. So, it's a little bit like if I gave you a lecture, if I was in material sciences and I told you about a new metal that we discovered, you asked me how can we use it to break locks. And, so what I do. I'm not trying to influence people via subliminal advertising. I'm all for the idea that it shouldn't be done. I just think a lot more things are like it. So the idea of how to use it makes me uncomfortable. I think we should, to the extent possible, make it clear to people what it is that's being influencing them as opposed to hiding. So it's sort of in the wrong direction. I know it's done all the time. Perceptual fluidity in general is very common. When you have sentences that rhyme, that we talk about all the time, that's where perceptual fluidity. when you have things like right to life, right to choice, all those kinds of sentences that we throw around, we all know that they're not subject abandoned, but they're done for a purpose. So, and they impact people's perception of things. So it's done all the time. I'm not saying we should do more of it. I think it's, you know, it's subtle. How policymakers ought to know channel factors?
Yes, yes.
You know, we teach policy students. It's a very complicated story. I should say, you know, when the president calls Alan Kruger last week and says to him, how should I do something, Alan says, take it up by 2%. When he calls me, if he were to call, I'd say, oh, it depends. How do you ask people? What do they think about it? He says, no, thank you. This is a very deep problem. I mean, we always joke you have to choose between being approximately right or precisely wrong. And sometimes being precisely wrong is useful. So there is a sense in which a lot of this stuff, although I believe that it's true about us, how to implement it, for the sheer fact that it's so nuanced and context dependent, becomes very tricky. A policy that works in one place might not work in the next place just because they're thinking about it differently, just because they perceive you, the policymaker, differently, just because they thought about something else. It reminds them of something else. So what you end up having to do, if you're really seriously asking how policymakers should do it, is you have to run pilot studies. You have to go and see, will it work in East St. Louis if I do X? And just because it worked in San Francisco doesn't mean it will work in St. Louis, and I have to change something. It makes it complicated. Government doesn't run based on pilot testing. It doesn't have the time or the patience. And so, you know, it's sort of anathema to how policy is run today, and I think it's a profound problem. Last one. What was the third one?
When is paternalism appropriate and how should it be?
When it's run by people we like. Yeah.
It's been a good first step for achieving number 2. The rest of us, how do we get more sophisticated about the approach? Where do we go?
We is who? I think policymakers should get trained in this stuff after they study microeconomics.
Consumers and citizens.
I'm sorry. Education. You know, some consumers will be more educated than others. I mean, at some point, this is where, you know, paternalism or some version of it comes in. At the end of the day, we depend on our politicians to try to arrange things. You know, this is one vision. People have other visions. This is back to the debate about leaving people to their own devices or not. But in my view, we depend on people who run things, which is, again, happens already, but less than it should, to arrange things in a way that we're least prone to things we don't want. I don't think we'll ever avoid it. In other words, look, knowing all this stuff doesn't, you know, I commit all the errors that our subjects commit. And I spend my life studying it.
There's no way an individual can really equip themselves to know what's going on in the bridge.
There is a way where you can be aware of it. If I did a class on framing today, on the issue that different ways of presenting a problem lead to different decisions, which is a very big issue, you can get to the point when you see a problem, you ask yourself, how would I think about it if I framed it otherwise? And that works. Now, you know, of course, what it shows that people under cognitive load, people who are busy, who are pressured, who don't have much time, are less likely to do it. But in the luxury of some peace of mind, decisions that have time and time to contemplate from different perspectives, asking yourself, how would I think about it if it was a different way? How would I think about this house if I wasn't already living in this way? You know, people, the status quo has an enormous impact. And very often, the choice between A and B depends enormously on whether you now have A or you now have B. That, for many of us, if you think about it, doesn't really make that much sense. You should end up with the one you prefer, independently of where you came from, you know, assuming that certain costs are not prohibited. But those sorts of framing and manipulations you could do. You could ask yourself, how would I think about it if it was this way? How would I think about it if I didn't have A before, if I did? Things like that. Look, I mean, you could, next time you go to the supermarket, ask yourself, am I buying this giant box of Cheerios as opposed to the smaller one because I really need it more, because per ounce it costs less, or, you know, what is it? And, you know, a lot of it is done in a way that with more thinking you would have a different perspective. You know, at the end of the day, if you think about, you know, pilots have a problem perceiving distance, so we install an instrument that helps. We have problems for which there is no instrument. There is no instrument that's going to make you choose houses correctly. all you can do is be sort of, modesty is the number one lesson. Don't trust your impulse, don't trust your intuition immediately. It may be good, but give it a test. Look at it from a different perspective and think if, are you falling into some contextual trap that you could avoid? But, it's easier said than done. Okay, last one, I'm getting a signal that we're...
I feel a little like marketers and advertisers are being painted as the only ones who know how to use some of this stuff with any competence. And if it's any consolation, I've observed that the reason most advertising campaigns and TV series and movies are so uninteresting and ultimately unsuccessful is because they themselves are the products of perceptual fluidity, because they're picked, in effect, by focus groups who gravitate toward familiar things, which are, that's why there's so many sequels and so many, as I say, cookie cutter campaigns and sitcoms. So if it's any consolation, they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot with that one. I have one question, though, about, do you have, I guess I want to leave here with a little word of encouragement. What hope do you have of involving the behavioral way of thinking in more public policy processes? In other words, we lament the dopey food stamp instructional brochure, but how could you, inject your thinking or thinking like it into that process of designing the program or just the pamphlet at the right moment? Do you have examples where that's taking place? Can you think of ways we might make that happen more?
I'm not sure to answer your question, but it's a very, very welcome comment. I should say, when you do what I do, you naturally come, since the straw man, since the standard working model is that of the rational agent, you come from a perspective where you focus on people's failures relative to that model. And this is a very well taken comment. I'm not at all a pessimist about the nature. I think in many ways it's much more exciting than the rational agent. There's nothing particularly depressing about this. The only place where it gets to be worrisome is when you design a world based on one set of assumptions or intuitions, when in fact we're guided by another. The idea that we are this way, not that way, seems to me perfectly fine. It's not really obvious why, if we don't choose things in a transitive manner, anything bad happens. But what is true is that we have developed, for whatever reason, a view of the human agent that's the rational agent model that seems to have seeped into policy. And to the extent that policy is guided by that model, and that model misses some things that are profound about us, that's where the tension arises. So the message shouldn't otherwise be negative. Now, by the way, the point of the marketer is certainly true. Marketing firms and people who try to sell you things fail too because their intuitions are bad. It's not that they know that much more. You think about it. In terms of policy used well, look, we could be in much worse places than we are today. Policy is not a giant failure. Some policies have worked better than others. A lot of people are living a better life than they would have otherwise due to policy. I don't want to choose specific examples. I don't know exactly how to evaluate them. It's not clear whether they kind of factual would be. But your point is very well taken. A lot of policies marching along, some of it better than other things. There's a lot of room for improvement if we get the right intuition. By the way, a lot of people have the right insight about behavior for all the wrong reasons. You can show a lot of us. If we go down the street and I see an ad for Burger King and I say I'm hungry, and I say I'm hungry because I saw the ad, that may be true, but not because I have any way of gauging that that's what caused my hunger. I have no introspective ability to know that. I just walk around believing that ads about food cause hunger, and it happens to be true in that case. But it doesn't always have to be true, and it comes from a different place, either from learning in books or from the cultural norm to which I have no access. City policy, some of the principles they use happen to be good principles. They don't always emanate from a healthy intuition, they sometimes don't emanate from a place of good understanding, but they happen to be real. The fact that money guides people, of course that's true, is a first approximation. There's just a lot more things going on. In contexts where there's much less competing against payoff, payoff is a pretty good predictor. In cases where payoff competes against other things that are stronger, it ends up being pretty weak. So it's a subtle way.